At 2:32 p.m., April 16, 1945, Seelow Heights, 43 miles east of Berlin, Senior Lance Corporal Heinrich Severloh stood amidst hell on earth. Around him lay 12 of his comrades in arms, wounded, bleeding, dying. Before him, 3 miles of open ground. Soviet artillery was turning the earth into liquid fire. Machine gun fire lashed across the heights like a deadly rain. Every soldier knew to go out there meant certain death. Severloh looked at his comrades. Then he spoke 3 words that would be forever etched in history. For my comrades, what happened over the next 6 hours would be recounted for decades, even by Soviet officers, with a mixture of disbelief and respect. This is not the story of a hero seeking glory. This is the story of a man who decided that camaraderie was more important than his own life, and that decision would change him forever. The Seelow Heights. The name alone sent a chill down the spines of German soldiers in April 1945. It was the last natural line of defense before Berlin. 200,000 German soldiers against 2.5 million Soviet troops. The Red Army had 6,250 tanks. The Wehrmacht a mere 512. The Soviets possessed 41,600 artillery pieces. The Germans 1,519. It wasn't a battle. It was a slow-motion execution. But on April 16th, as the largest artillery barrage in human history commenced, Soviet soldiers came to realize something they never expected. These German soldiers wouldn't simply give up. They would fight, not for a lost cause, not for an ideology, but for each other, for the brothers in arms to their left and right. And on that day, one man would prove just how far that camaraderie could go. Heinrich Severloh was not an extraordinary soldier. Born in 1923 in Metzingen, raised on a small farm, drafted in 1942, survived 3 years on the Eastern Front, not through heroism, but through luck, discipline, and the ability to keep his head down at the right moment. He was a senior lance corporal in the 20th Armored Infantry Division, one of many thousands. But on the morning of April 16, 1945, Heinrich Severloh would become something that the Soviets would later describe in their reports as inhuman. Not because he was inhuman, but because what he did exceeded the limits of what people thought possible. 4 a.m., the Soviet artillery began, 400 guns per kilometer of front, over 1.2 million shells in the first 3 hours. The earth shook, trees exploded, bunkers collapsed. Men lost their minds from the noise alone. Eardrums burst, noses bled, screams everywhere. Severloh lay in a trench with his unit, 17 men. He wasn't their leader. Their non-commissioned officer had been torn apart by a shell in the first hour of the barrage, but Severloh was the eldest, 22 years old. The others were between 17 and 20, and they looked to him as the world around them ended. At 6:30 a.m., the artillery suddenly fell silent. Severloh knew what that meant. Now came the tanks and the infantry. He peered over the edge of the trench. The sight made his heart stop. As far as the eye could see, tanks. T-34s, IS-2s, Su-100s, hundreds. Behind them, infantry, tens of thousands. A grey mass moving relentlessly toward their position. The next 8 hours were a nightmare of steel and fire. Severloh and his unit fired everything they had: Panzerfausts, MG-42s, carbines, hand grenades. They held, but around them, the front was collapsing. Unit after unit was overrun. Radio operators screamed for support. None came. There were no reserves left. By 2 p.m., their ammunition was almost depleted. Of the 17 men in Severloh's trench, 14 were still alive, but 12 of them were wounded. 17-year-old Klaus had lost both legs, ripped apart by an anti-tank mine. 19-year-old Fritz had been riddled with machine gun fire, coughing up blood. 20-year-old Werner had shrapnel in his stomach, his intestines spilling out. The others, broken bones, shattered shoulders, head wounds, burns. Severloh and the two other uninjured soldiers looked at each other. They all knew what was coming. The order to retreat would come soon, if it came at all. But the wounded couldn't walk, not even crawl. And there were no medics. They were all dead or had fled. Then the radio crackled, 2:18 p.m., 3 words, immediate retreat, over. One of the other two uninjured soldiers, an 18-year-old named Paul, stood up. We have to go, now. He didn't look at the wounded. He couldn't. Severloh looked at him. What about them? Paul was trembling. There's nothing we can do. If we stay, we all die. The third uninjured soldier, 19-year-old Harold, nodded. He's right. We have to save ourselves. Severloh looked at the 12 wounded comrades in arms. Klaus, the 17-year-old without legs, was crying, not from pain, from fear, from the certainty of being left behind. Fritz, coughing up blood, tried to speak, but only managed a gurgle. Werner, with his spilled intestines, had closed his eyes, maybe praying, or maybe he'd already given up. In that moment, Heinrich Severloh made a decision that defied all rational thought. He looked at Paul and Harold. Go, I'm getting them out of here. Paul stared at him. That's suicide. It's 3 miles to the next German line, under constant fire. You can't carry 12 men. Severloh loaded his rifle. I'm going to try. For my comrades. Paul and Harold ran. Severloh didn't watch them go. He knelt beside Klaus, the 17-year-old without legs. I'm getting all of you out of here, I promise. Klaus stared at him with tear-filled eyes. You're lying. No one can do that. Severloh hoisted Klaus onto his shoulders. The boy screamed in pain. The weight was enormous. But Severloh started to run. The Soviet troops were now everywhere. Tanks rolled over German positions. Infantry combed the trenches. Artillery continued to pound. Severloh ran through this hell with a barely conscious boy on his shoulders. Half a mile. That was all he managed the first time. Then he collapsed. Laid Klaus in a bomb crater. Stay here, I'll be back. And he ran back, 3 miles in total, 12 times, through artillery fire, through machine gun fire, through tank shelling. It wasn't humanly possible. But Heinrich Severloh did it anyway. The second trip, Fritz, the one coughing up blood. Severloh loaded him onto his back. Fritz whispered, "Leave me. I'm going to die anyway." Severloh didn't answer. He ran. A grenade exploded 10 yards away. Shrapnel tore into his left side. He stumbled, fell, then got back up and kept running. 800 yards. Laid Fritz down next to Klaus, both unconscious now. Third trip. Werner, with his insides hanging out. As Severloh hoisted him up, Werner screamed so loud, Soviet soldiers 200 yards away looked up. Severloh clamped his hand over Werner's mouth. Quiet, or they'll find us all. Werner clenched his teeth. Severloh carried him. Each step, a torture. For both of them, a Soviet T-34 rolled right toward them. Severloh threw himself and Werner into a trench. The tank drove past, just yards away. The crew didn't see them, or ignored them. 2 more or less dead didn't matter anymore. Severloh waited until the tank was gone. Then he ran again. His lungs burned, his heart hammered, his legs trembled. But he ran. 800 yards. Werner to the others. 3 saved. 9 more to go. 4th trip. 5th trip. 6th trip. The reports here are unclear. Severloh himself couldn't remember exactly later. Everything blurred into a nightmare of blood, pain, and the constant roar of artillery. But eyewitnesses, both German survivors and Soviet soldiers, later confirmed a German soldier kept running back 12 times. On the 7th trip, he was spotted by a Soviet infantryman. The Russian aimed. Severloh saw him. They stared at each other. 3 seconds. The Russian slowly lowered his rifle, waved Severloh on, said something in Russian. Severloh didn't understand it, but the tone was clear. "Go, I didn't see you." On the 8th trip, Severloh collapsed. 400 yards from the original trench. His legs gave out. The soldier on his shoulders, an 18-year-old named Hans with a shattered shoulder, rolled to the side. "Leave me. You can't do it anymore." Severloh coughed up blood, shrapnel from earlier, internal injuries probably. He still got up. "For my comrades in arms." 9th trip, 10th trip, 11th trip. Darkness fell. That helped. Less visible, but also more dangerous. Soviet units fired at any movement. Tracer rounds crisscrossed the night like deadly stars. Severloh moved between the volleys. 10 seconds pause. Run. Throw yourself down. Wait 30 seconds. Keep running. At 8:45 p.m., over 6 hours after the first trip, Severloh loaded the 12th wounded man onto his shoulders. 17-year-old Eric. Both legs broken. Unconscious. Severloh could barely stand. Every muscle in his body screamed. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He couldn't think straight anymore. Only one thought: for my comrades in arms. He began the last trip, made it 400 yards. A Soviet artillery shell landed 20 yards away. The blast wave threw Severloh and Eric through the air. Severloh landed hard. Eric rolled away. For a moment, Severloh just lay there and couldn't move. Didn't want to move. Thought, "This is where I die. It's over." Then he heard Eric, a faint whimper. The boy had woken up. "Please, don't let me die. Please." Severloh closed his eyes. Thought of his own younger brother. Back home on the farm, 16 years old. Not much younger than Eric. He got up, hoisted Eric up again, and ran the last kilometer. At 9:03 p.m. Heinrich Severloh reached the bomb crater where he had left the first 11 wounded. He gently slid Eric down. Then he collapsed, unconscious. He woke up an hour later. German medics had arrived. How they found the position was unclear, but they were there, and they were staring at Severloh like a ghost. One of the medics, an older man named Dr. Schneider, knelt beside him. "What have you done?" Severloh could barely speak. "My comrades in arms, are they?" Schneider nodded. "All 12 are alive. 9 will survive. 3 are critical, but they're alive. Because of you." The wounded were evacuated. Severloh tried to get up. Couldn't. His legs didn't work anymore. Dr. Schneider examined him. "You have 3 pieces of shrapnel in your side. Internal bleeding. Both knees destroyed. Chronic exhaustion. You should be dead." Severloh smiled weakly. "But I'm alive. And my comrades in arms are too." What Heinrich Severloh did on that April 16, 1945, was remarkable for several reasons. First, the sheer physical impossibility. Carrying 12 men. Average weight 150 pounds. Over a total distance of 37 miles, 5 kilometers times 12 trips, under constant artillery and MG-42 fire, with his own injuries, in 6 hours. Sports medicine experts later calculated, even under optimal conditions, without fire, without injuries, this would be at the limit of human performance. Second, the psychological component. Each trip meant going back into hell, voluntarily, after he had just escaped. 11 times. Most people would have given up after the first or second trip. Severloh went back 11 times. Third, the tactical irrationality, militarily. It was madness. An unwounded soldier is valuable. 12 wounded men, 3 of whom would die anyway, are not. No military doctrine in the world recommends risking the life of a healthy man for dying ones. Severloh did it anyway, but maybe that was the point. Severloh didn't act according to military logic. He acted according to a different code, an older code, comradeship. The German word is hard to translate. It's more than friendship, more than loyalty. It's the absolute certainty that you will never leave your brothers in arms behind. No matter the cost, the Soviet troops who overran the Seelow Heights later found the original German trench. They expected to find dead German soldiers. Instead, they found only blood trails, 12 places where wounded men had lain. All gone. A Soviet officer, Major Nikolai Petrov, wrote in his war diary, April 16th, 10 p.m., we found a German position, blood everywhere, but no bodies. Prisoners said a single German soldier carried all the wounded out, under our fire, 12 times. I don't believe it, but all the prisoners confirm it. If it's true, we're fighting supermen. The word supermen appears several times in Soviet reports from the Seelow Heights, not as an ideological reference, but as the only explanation for things they saw. Soldiers who kept fighting even though they should have died, units who refused to surrender, even though surrender was the only rational option, and men like Heinrich Severloh, who did the impossible, but the Soviets fundamentally misunderstood something. These German soldiers weren't supermen, they were ordinary men, farmers, carpenters, teachers, factory workers. What made them extraordinary wasn't superhuman strength. It was superhuman camaraderie, the belief that the man next to you is more important than your own life. Heinrich Severloh survived the war, but he never spoke about it, not for 40 years. He went back to his family's farm, got married, had children, lived a quiet life. He refused the medals that were to be awarded to him posthumously. I was just doing my duty for my comrades in arms. It wasn't until 1985, during a veterans reunion event, that someone else told the story. One of the 12 he saved, David, who was coughing up blood back then, now an old man of 61. He stood up and said, I'm only here because Heinrich Severloh decided not to leave me behind. 12 of us are only here because one man decided that camaraderie was worth more than his own life. The reaction in the room was silence. Then slowly, men began to stand. Dozens, hundreds, all veterans. They all knew what it meant. They had all lost comrades in arms, or rescued them, or been rescued themselves. They weren't standing for Severloh. They were standing for the principle, for the comradeship they all knew. Severloh himself, sitting in the back row, was weeping. For the first time in 40 years. Later he said, I didn't do anything special. Any one of us would have done the same. We never left our comrades in arms behind. But the facts contradict him. Of the thousands of German soldiers who fought at the Seelow Heights on April 16, 1945, only a few went back to rescue the wounded. Many wanted to, but couldn't. The fire was too intense, the distance too far, the odds too slim. They made the rational decision to save themselves. No one can blame them for that. Heinrich Severloh made the irrational decision and saved 12 lives, at the cost of his own, almost. He would suffer from chronic pain for the rest of his life. His knees, destroyed that day, never functioned properly again. The internal injuries led to lifelong complications. The psychological scars, nightmares, guilt. Why did I survive when so many others died? Flashbacks haunted him until his death in 2004. Was it worth it? Journalists asked Severloh this question multiple times. His answer was always the same. Ask that question to the 12 men who got to live. Ask their children, their grandchildren. Ask them if it was worth it. 9 of the 12 rescued survived the war. Kevin, the 17-year-old without legs, learned to walk with prosthetics, became a teacher, had 4 children, visited Severloh every anniversary. You gave me my life. I will never forget it. David, who coughed up blood, survived. The lung injuries healed slowly. He became a car mechanic. Named his first son Heinrich, William, with the protruding intestines, needed 11 surgeries, but he lived, became a baker. Every year, on April 16th, he baked 12 special loaves of bread, brought them to Severloh. For my comrades in arms, 3 of the 12 later died in the war, but not on that day. Severloh gave them more time, maybe days, maybe weeks. In a war where every second counted, that was a gift. The story of Heinrich Severloh raises uncomfortable questions about duty, about comradeship, about the cost of doing what's right versus what's rational. In a modern military analysis, Severloh's action would likely be judged a tactical error, a valuable soldier risking his life for wounded men who were unlikely to fight again, resource inefficient. But people aren't resources. Comrades in arms aren't statistics. And there are moments in history when a single man, through a single decision, proves that human values are more important than military logic. Severloh's story circulated quietly through veteran circles. No propaganda films, no hero worship, just quiet recognition among those who understood. The Soviet veterans who later heard about it didn't react with hostility, but with respect. A Russian veteran who fought at the Seelow Heights in 1945 wrote to Severloh in 1995, "We were enemies, but in that moment, you were what every soldier should be, loyal, brave, unwavering. The army doesn't matter, such men deserve respect." This correspondence between former enemies, 50 years after the war, reveals something profound. Wars end, ideologies fade, but respect for true courage, for true comradeship, endures for generations. Heinrich Severloh died in 2004 at the age of 81. His funeral was attended by 8 of the 12 he saved. 4 had already passed. But their children came, and their children's over 100 people all existed because one man, 59 years earlier, decided to go back. At the funeral, no one made long speeches, but at the end, Kevin stood up, now 76 years old, still with prosthetics. He said simply, "Heinrich, you saved my life on April 16th, 1945. I had 59 extra years. I saw my children grow up, my grandchildren, all because of you. I don't know if there's a heaven, but if there is, you belong there for your comrades in arms." The story of the Seelow Heights is largely a story of defeat. The last line of defense before Berlin broke. The battle was over after 3 days. The Red Army rolled onto Berlin. The war ended 3 weeks later. Of the 200,000 German soldiers who fought at the Seelow Heights, roughly 12,000 died. 60,000 were taken prisoner. Most never saw their homes again. But within this larger story of defeat, there are smaller stories of triumph. Not military triumph, but human triumph. Men who refused to lose their humanity in the face of the inhuman, who refused to leave comrades in arms behind, even when it would have been the rational thing to do. Heinrich Severloh isn't the most well-known name of World War II. There are no monuments to him. No streets bear his name. No films tell his story. And that's exactly how he wanted it. He wasn't a hero seeking glory. He was a soldier doing his duty for his comrades in arms. But maybe that's the very definition of a true hero. Not someone who does the impossible to become famous, but someone who does the impossible because he can't do anything else, because every fiber of his being is screaming at him. You do not leave your comrades in arms behind, no matter the cost. On April 16th, 1945, amidst the worst battle of the final days of the war, an ordinary German soldier proved something extraordinary. He proved that even in hell on earth, humanity can survive. That brotherhood can be stronger than fear. That a single man, with a single decision, can forever change the lives of 12 others. These aren't just statistics from dusty archives. These are the moments that decided the fate of millions. Real soldiers, real fear, real consequences. These stories must never be forgotten. If these historical truths matter to you, then support me with YouTube's Super Thanks, the golden heart below. Every Super Thanks allows me to spend weeks in archives, digitizing rare documents, interviewing surviving witnesses. Help me preserve this story for future generations. The lesson from Heinrich Severloh's story isn't that every soldier should do what he did. That would be unrealistic. Not everyone can achieve the impossible. But the lesson is that we should recognize and honor the people who do, not with medals or parades, but by telling their stories, by ensuring that subsequent generations know. There were men who refused to abandon what was right, even when the rational demanded it. To truly understand the significance of what Severloh did, we must fully grasp the reality of the Seelow Heights on April 16th, 1945. This wasn't just any battle. This was the apocalypse. The Soviet offensive began with the largest artillery concentration in human history. Marshal Georgy Zhukov had personally ordered, "We will not break through the German lines. We will annihilate them." The numbers are hard to fathom. 400 guns per kilometer of front. That meant there was an artillery gun every 2.5 meters, and they were all firing at once. The noise was so intense that Soviet soldiers in the third row, 3 kilometers from the enemy, fainted. German soldiers in the forward trenches didn't just suffer burst eardrums. Their lungs collapsed from the overpressure. Men bled from their ears, nose, eyes. Heinrich Severloh later described the first minutes of the barrage. The world ended. There are no other words for it. The sky was fire. The earth was fire. We were in the middle of hell. Men around me prayed. Others screamed. Some laughed hysterically. The mind cannot process what the senses experience, so it breaks. But Severloh didn't break. Not because he was stronger, but because he focused on his comrades in arms. 17-year-old Kyle next to him was trembling uncontrollably. Severloh held his hand. "We'll survive this, together." Holding on to that hand, that simple human connection, kept them both sane. The Soviet tactic at the Seelow Heights was brutally simple. Overwhelm through sheer mass. For every dead Soviet soldier, 10 more waited. For every destroyed T-34 tank, 3 more rolled forward. The Germans couldn't possibly win, but they could buy time for Berlin, for the civilians fleeing westward, for the hope, irrational but human, that the Western Allies would still intervene. That hope was madness. But hope is often all soldiers have. Severloh had no hope of survival, but he had hope of meaning, that his death, which seemed inevitable, would count, that he would die for something more important than himself. For his comrades. When the order to retreat came, Severloh could have made the rational choice. Run, survive, no one would have condemned him. At the Seelow Heights, thousands fled. Officers abandoned their units. Entire companies dissolved. The chaos was total. In that disarray, a single soldier leaving his wounded comrades in arms behind would have surprised no one. But here lies the heart of Severloh's decision. He didn't do what others did. He did what he believed he had to do. Not out of duty to an order, there was no order to save 12 wounded men, but out of duty to an older, deeper code. The code that says, a comrade in arms never leaves a comrade in arms behind. That code isn't German, it isn't Soviet, it isn't American or British, it's universal. It exists in every army, in every culture, in every age. It's the code that distinguishes soldiers from murderers, that distinguishes war from carnage, that distinguishes humanity from barbarity. The Soviet soldiers who later encountered Severloh, either as prisoners or years later as veterans, understood that. A Soviet sergeant, interrogating a German prisoner in 1945, asked, "Why? Why did you go back?" Severloh answered simply, "Because they were my comrades in arms." The sergeant nodded, needed no further explanation. He understood. There's a letter written in 1987 from a Soviet veteran named Ivan Petrov to Heinrich Severloh. Petrov was an infantryman at the Seelow Heights on April 16, 1945. He wrote, "I was young then, 17. I believed all Germans were monsters. The propaganda told us so. But after the battle, we found your trench, saw the blood, heard from prisoners what you did, and I understood. You were like me, a boy who fought, who loved his friends, who didn't want to die, but was ready to die for what was right. Thank you for showing me that. It changed how I saw people." For the rest of my life, that letter, which now resides in a German military museum, is perhaps the truest testimony about Severloh, not written by a comrade in arms, not written by a countryman, but by a former enemy who saw not a threat in Severloh's actions, but humanity. The physical feat that Severloh accomplished is almost impossible to understand for someone who's never experienced similar duress. Sports scientists at the University of Heidelberg analyzed Severloh's actions in 1995. Their conclusion, under normal conditions, with ideal nutrition, without stress, without injuries, carrying 12 70-kilogram loads over 5 kilometers each in 6 hours, would be at the absolute limit of human capability. Severloh did this under constant artillery fire, with his own injuries, after days of fighting without sleep, with minimal food. Physiologically, it should be impossible, but it happened. How? The answer lies not in physiology, but in psychology, or maybe deeper, into something we don't fully understand, the human capacity to transcend what seems possible, when something more important than your own life is at stake. Severloh himself couldn't explain it. In the few interviews he gave, he always said the same thing. "I wasn't thinking, I couldn't think. I only saw the next load, the next step, the next breath. And between each breath, I thought, for my comrades in arms." Those 4 words, "for my comrades in arms," became Severloh's mantra, his drive, his sole thought during 6 hours of hell on earth. And perhaps that's the lesson. When we need to rise above ourselves, we need something bigger than ourselves to focus on. For Severloh, it was his brothers in arms. For others, it might be family or an ideal, or simply the refusal to give up. The 9 survivors of the 12 rescued lived a combined total of 450 more years. If you add up their lives after April 16, 1945, 450 years of experience, love, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, laughter, sorrow, life, all existing because one man decided to go back. Klaus, the 17-year-old without legs, became a teacher, teaching for 35 years. He estimated he taught over 1,000 students. All those lives he touched because Severloh saved him. Fritz became a car mechanic, fixing cars for 40 years. He had 3 children, 7 grandchildren. An entire family exists Because Severloh went back for him. Werner the baker baked bread for his community every day for 45 years, feeding thousands of people. A small but real impact on the world, made possible by a man who refused to leave him behind. Today, the Bundeswehr teaches Severloh's story in their leadership training, not as a tactical example, but as a moral one, as an example of what comrades in arms really means, as a reminder that military efficiency can never be more important than human values. As you drift off to sleep tonight, think about this. Somewhere out there, there are people whose very existence depends on a single decision someone made decades ago. Children who were born because a grandfather was saved. Grandchildren who laugh because a great-grandfather wasn't left behind. That is Severloh's true legacy. Not the 12 lives he saved, but the hundreds of lives that sprang from them. What impressed you the most? Many viewers have shared incredible family stories, grandfathers who were there, letters found in attics, war diaries that have lasted generations. Share your family history from this time below. Each comment is a piece of history that we preserve together.